أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening. Welcome to On the Couch with me, Farida, Rabia and Soki and Zinzi. On the Couch aims to unpack, deal and confront those issues we often don't want to address, but issues that affect you or those close to you. This is where you hear the difference on 100.4 FM. Now, On the Couch, together with Lately in Land and Housing, is your weekly show that discusses current affairs in political landscape pertaining to housing, evictions, equitable access to land, and tenure security. Today, we will uncover the people's land. Now, on the line, we have Karen Hendricks, who is from Reclaim the City, and a bit later, we will be speaking to Nikelwa, who is leader on the Idibano Yabaslali organization. Good evening, Karen, and welcome to On the Couch.
Good evening, Farida, and good evening to all the listeners.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, thank you, Farida.
I feel like it's a very interesting evening when we think about the taxi strikes and we think about traffic, and so much inconvenience is happening to people's lives right now.
Yes, of course, and also people having to travel miles to get home in the evening, and also learners having to access their schools, and people having to access places or amenities or hospitals. So that too, and that is what links the struggle for housing or dignified housing to public transport. Or safe public transport.
Exactly, because you then think like, okay, we're looking at the options that are available in terms of housing and where people are actually allocated. And this difficulty that we have now, of course, now the conversation is that we need to move people closer to the places of work, and so that we don't experience such a great inconvenience. I've seen kids walking down Clipperton Road, and it wasn't a beautiful sight to see, and people are still walking down. So it's very scary.
Yeah, yes, of course.
You can go.
No, I said yes, of course. It is scary and it is unsafe. And you know, Farida, that is actually what the housing crisis at the moment is about. Mm-hmm. It's about people having to commute all that way to access the city, or to access economic opportunities or social amenities.
Yeah.
And so yes, so for me that it's so important that tonight that we speak about too why it's important also for women and their families to be able to access the city.
No, definitely no. And last week we hosted the women from the Women's Legal Center and the Alliance for Rural Democracy Trust. And, you know, keeping with that theme, we do think it's important to have this conversation, because we do see that the sort of the numbers and the way life is right now, we are seeing that, you know, women are leading the forefront in terms of looking after their homes and seeking employment, and they're coming back to look after their families. So it is an important part to get women that side. But then we're looking at 29 years into democracy, and we still face this massive land and housing problem. What's happening?
So, you know, Farida, what we do see is that some people are getting homes, they're being allocated homes, and others are not. And there's no real system to decide who gets and who doesn't get. And often this actually causes resentment amongst people. So those who don't get the homes or the housing are forced to plan their own means or their own alternatives of building a home, and to find land to build a home. And so that is the real problem with how housing is allocated and to who housing is allocated. And at the moment, we also sit with this housing database that we are pushing so that that housing database is made public, because the housing database too is causing a lot of resentment amongst people. And I mean, a lot of people who have been living in informal settlements, or people who have been historically displaced or pushed out to go and live on the periphery of the city or on the Greater Cape Flats, are people who are on this housing database. But then, of course, as I've always said in the past, Farida, people cannot live in a housing database. They have to live in homes.
Yeah.
And so that is the problem with the allocation of homes, or the allocation of land, or access to land to build homes for people.
That's really important. It really is. But then also, there's this really great big delay that's happening, right? And you see it in District 6, you see it in places where people have been waiting, and they wait, and then they're old and they die. And we're still having this conversation. So, people like yourselves, I assume, is supposed to offer hope, and sort of make things easier for listeners and people who find themselves in that situation.
Yes, of course, Farida. And of course, people who live across the spatial divide of our city, but were forcibly removed from these areas. And just to put on the record that people do have freedom of movement. And we shouldn't say that people don't belong in our city. And this is actually becoming a problem, because people are saying that people are coming from the Eastern Cape, and they are coming to live in our city. They're coming to live in these areas, and that are well located and so forth. But the bottom line is that people do have freedom of movement, and we should say we shouldn't say that they don't belong here. And then also, what is also very, for me, what is very clear here is that the government has lacked the political will to truly address this spatial apartheid, and has leaned heavily on the private sector, because that's all you hear nowadays, government joining in with the private sector to develop the so-called much-needed housing. But Farida, this has led also to corruption, because we see that the private sector only caters for the rich, and so they only build exclusionary developments. And then the poor and working class are then forced to fight for a very small amount of affordable units or homes. And we must also remember that in 2017, the city of Cape Town promised to develop 11 sites in the inner city. So that would be in the suburbs of Woodstock and Salt River. And I mean, to this day, there are still empty plots and empty promises. And to this day, only 19 units has been built, not 19 sites has been developed. And so that too, people need to know that. Those are the bare facts that people don't know, Farida. And there's also this. I think it's part of the system pushing a narrative to say that people should be patient and that people need to wait their turn, etc., etc. But we need to be close to opportunities. And there are no options from the private sector. And if we don't take action, Farida, and if we don't also do that with hope, people will die in poverty, people will die in squalor. And when unutilized buildings, when people occupy them and people live in these buildings, they're living in constant fear of being raided, fear of the red ants or law enforcement coming to forcefully remove them. And I mean, our city already has a history of forced removals ever since the Group Areas Act, and even before that. This colonial city has a history of that. And also, people don't have security of tenure. And so we want security of tenure. We want to feel safe. We want to feel as if we are living in dignified homes. It cannot be that, and particularly women, it can't be that women are still living in squalor, women and their families, and we have this progressive constitution and Bill of Rights, and yet we still experiencing these problems. We're still experiencing even the harsh laws of the past.
We have Nicola on the line with us. Nicola, good evening and welcome to On the Couch. I'm not sure if you've been hearing what Karen has been speaking about, but we started the conversation just analyzing our current situation in Cape Town. I was saying to her that I have been seeing school children walking on Klipfontein Road trying to get some form of transport, and perhaps they would walk home eventually if they don't get the transport, and then some working people also walking home. And then we sort of tied this into the issue of housing. If people were able to live closer to where opportunities are, closest to their schools and so on, then perhaps we wouldn't have seen this kind of situation. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that with regards to people living closer to amenities like good schools, employment opportunities. What you see happening or manifesting right now with children walking long distances to school, it is a failed project of the apartheid, because the people, when they were dispossession is that people were not were put in places like Mitchell's Plain, your Manenberg, your Guguletu, and Khayelitsha. And what we are seeing happening now in our townships, it is a failing project that was of the apartheid system, but that is also now continuing, because you must remember when 1994 came, the government changed, but the systems were carried over. Hence, Comrade Karen was saying that we are still subjected to the laws of the apartheid system, because you are having a situation where the constitution says that the people of South Africa have a right to housing. Yet, on the other hand, the agents of government are the ones that also pass bylaws that render people homeless, or that make it illegal for you to be, or make it illegal or a criminal thingy for you to be poor and to be a landless person. Because we are having a situation now where instead of the city of Cape Town, even national government, because we are not going to exempt them from this, they are the supreme law of the country, where all spheres of government have absconded from their duties. They've left the people to fend themselves, and when the people fend themselves by occupying buildings, by occupying open lands, they pass laws to counter that, instead of providing the very same people that they are going to come to their occupations next year when they are wanting to be voted into office again. They've left them to fend for themselves, and they are also, these people are creating a situation where people die. People are literally dying because people have to resort to connecting electricity illegally, have to resort to connecting water illegally. But we are not going to say it's an illegal connections. No, it is the people's connections, because it is the people's power. People are taking their initiative where government has absconded from its duty.
We should continue that. I'd like to explore that more, but we will do that after the break. It is 100.4 FM on the couch. On the Couch, together with Lately in Land and Housing, is your weekly show that discusses current affairs in political landscape pertaining to housing, evictions, equitable access to land, tenure security, and today we are unpacking the people's land and what women can do about land and housing. Now, there are a few messages that came through. There is also an update on traffic. Cape Town traffic officers are affecting the following road closures. The N2 inbound is closed at Drake's Hervel Drive. The N2 outbound is closed at the M5. Motorists traveling from the N2 are being diverted onto the M5. Southbound, Drake's Hervel Drive is closed between the R300 and the Govan Mbeki. Motorists are advised to seek alternative routes and proceed with caution. Motorists going to Mitchell's Plain are also stuck in Skarpkraal as they try to avoid Jake's Hervel Drive. Now we on the line. We have with us Karen Hendricks from Reclaim the City and a leader of the Indibano Yabahlali Nikilwa, and we're speaking about land, housing, and the issue that we find ourselves in. But before I get to our guests, just want to read some of the messages. One message just came through. It's actually a video, and it says, Salam recorded this while listening to the radio station. Children walking home from school. They living so far from school. Mothers carrying their sick children on their backs from Red Cross Hospital. People walking home from a long day of work. Absolutely pathetic. And then we have another listener saying, it seems that apartheid is being used as a scapegoat, and as we continue to blame the apartheid regime. Now, Nikelwa, I'd like to pose this to you because you say that, our system is a failed product, it's a failed project, and thus you make reference to 29 years ago and the struggle that the people have. And then also Karen then also mentioned that people have freedom of movement. People can move to wherever they want to, and you can't stop someone. Now, just thinking about that and thinking about the issue. So say we are saying, like, in the Western Cape, we don't have space for people in the Western Cape or in Cape Town in particular. Then how are you guys as leaders and activists and organizations letting the people know that, look, people have freedom of movement, and as a result of the history we have, this is where we find ourselves, but perhaps you too can find a way to another city? Is that sort of what we are trying to say?
Comrade, when I said that, when I reference the apartheid government, I'm not mistaken, and I'm not going to apologize about that. However, when we talk about the issue of land, we need to start with dispossession, and how now dispossession is being continued by the present day government. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're also talking about the freedom to move, to say that land is not available, there is land. It's a matter of there are government departments that are custodians of the land. When I'm saying that a government department, you have a custody, having custody over something, it means that thing you are holding it on behalf of the people. Government does not own the land, but we've been conditioned, our minds, we've been brainwashed as the citizens of this country to believe that government owns land. Government does not own land. Land is for the people. And that is the narrative that we are supposed to be preaching to the people. And the people have the right to say or to mandate the government on how to utilize that land. Now, you cannot say to me that, and here in this country, the tendency that is happening is that when you voice these things, you become the enemy because you are stepping on somebody's toes. Land here in this country is being harbored. It's being preserved for the minority instead of serving the people. You understand? And land in this country has been commodified. It has been commodified. And when when land is given value, it becomes a problem because not everyone can afford now to have access to that land. When I'm saying that the apartheid government, the apartheid agenda is being continued. I'm not mistaken. Land is harbored for the minority. Only a minority have access to land. Go to Manenberg, see how people are living in squalor. Come to Khayelitsha, see how people are living in squalor. To Cape Town, CBD, our brothers and sisters are living on the street. Those are sober people. Those are people that are sober. But the conditions that have been created by this government, the conditions that, you see the difference or the similarity between the apartheid government and the present day government is that they are both killing us. The apartheid government was killing us, was killing our mothers physically. The present government is creating conditions that also kill us, because for you we are subjected to a lot of things. They deploy the police, they deploy law enforcement to come and shoot us and shoot on our comrades. How many comrades from the movement Abahlali Basamjondole have been killed because of this question of land? When people occupied, you are a state, we are a state, a threat to the state. You understand? So people need to know that land is ours. The government is just holding the land as it's in custody of the land. And we are the ones that are supposed to be giving the government the mandate on how to utilize that land. And we did so in 2020 when we occupied in Khayelitsha, when we occupied in Fuleni, when we occupied in Kraaifontein, all these areas. And also the comrades Karen were not mistaken, they were sober when they occupied the building in Waterfront and the building in Woodstock. And they need to stop illegitimizing our struggle by saying that in our occupations we harbor criminals. We don't harbor criminals. We are not criminals. We are the citizens of this country. And what we are doing by occupying these pockets of land or occupying these vacant buildings, we are assisting the government in this land release project that they seem to be dragging their feet in.
Okay.
That is what we are doing.
Let me understand what you are saying. When you speak about occupation, are you saying that a people come together, make up their mind and go to a certain place where it's vacant and then start living there because of the situation, thus land is free and they can do that? Is that not illegal?
So I'm not sure if you want me to answer that, but I do actually have an answer for that, Farida. So my answer to that is, and I want listeners to understand this, because there's the narrative that's out there and the narrative that's being pushed criminalizes the poorest of poor or those who do not have access to housing.
Yeah.
And so first and foremostly, it is to say to people that unlawful occupation of buildings and land, especially these occupations that we are living in, have become our homes. And we made them our homes. If we did not occupy these spaces or these sites and turn them into our homes, then we too would have been rendered homeless. And so it has now become our homes, and there's a difference between unlawfully occupying to turn the space into a home and to build a housing alternative for those who are not who are not given access to housing. And then secondly, the other part that people need to understand, and they need to very clearly listen, is that hijacking a building or hijacking land means that you are renting, either renting out the land or the building, or you are trying to make a profit. And that is not the case in all of these occupations. People are living in these occupations to have a home, to have a dignified home, and particularly women, because in most of the occupations and even informal settlements across the spatial divide of Cape Town, we find that the majority of people or households are led by women. And I mean, we are 29 years into democracy, as Mikhailova has
Excuse
said.
me.
It cannot be that 29 years into democracy and with a progressive constitution as we have, that women are still subjected to this kind of injustice. It's actually injustice, Nikhelwa. So that's the one thing. The other thing that I'd like to really point out is what do we want government to do, or what do we want the city to do? Or what do we want all the spheres of government to do? So there's the first and foremost step to this is we want all spheres of government to recognize our struggle, not as a fiscal issue, but as a human issue. And we want them to realize that human dignity underpins our constitution, and that we need to commit to provide dignified housing, which is affordable and with security of tenure.
I agree with that. I definitely believe this is a human thing. It is, I believe in the dignity of people, and people deserve to be in homes and in places where they are free, they smell fresh air and so on. I'm just not understanding when you say unlawful occupation, all that you just explained now and wanted us to understand. I'm still not getting it, because it still sounds illegal. Although Nikhelwa is saying that land belongs to the people, I get that, but then government owns the land. So if we are then occupying spaces, you speak of rent, who would we be renting from? And then you spoke about profit, and how are we making profit in that regard? I want you to think about that, but I just need to read a few messages. This person is saying, the apartheid system was so well engineered that we still see the effect of the Group Areas Act. House slaves will blame the field slaves and not the slave master. And yes, the current house slaves in the government have perpetuated the apartheid system. There are no equal opportunities, and criminal syndicates are in cahoots with certain politicians and are allowed to oppress the masses. And the listener further says he or she continues to agree with Nikhelwa, and that comment came through then. Then says house and field slave analogy from Malcolm X. More messages coming in saying, Salam, what happens if you worked and studied hard, managed to buy your own home, but then fall sick and forced to sell, and now you are homeless? Why do they say I now will never be able to qualify for a free home, but I was born in this country and tried my best, worked as a public servant, got sick because of my job, but was too ill to fight that same corrupt government and was not medically boarded? Why now that I am jobless, I will never be able to qualify, because when I work, I had my own house? I don't know if you have a few comments or thoughts on that.
So I don't know if Nikhelwa wants to respond to that, but I'll respond to that, to say to the listener, that's exactly the kind of injustice, and that's exactly the reason why people are fed up of the promises that are made by government to build housing, to give people access to land to build housing or to build homes. And we see how even the administrative processes, how things play out. And it's never in favor of the people. The system is never in favor of the people. And so once again, and there I agree with, of course, with Nikhelwa when she says, yes, we are still very much living under those same laws which apartheid brought about. We are still seeing the same patterns of displacement. We are still seeing the same patterns of injustice when it comes to housing. And then I think your question for me earlier was what I meant when I spoke about unlawful, isn't that still illegal and so forth. Unlawfully occupying really means that you are living on the site without the permission of the owner.
Is that?
But then there's this narrow.
Is that okay?
Yes. Of course, it's not okay. But then, of course, there have been promises made by government to build affordable housing on these sites, like the Sissigul House, like the Helen Bowden Nurses Home. And our occupation of Sissigul House and Helen Bowden Nurses Home was to occupy the space, to hold the government to account, to build the much needed housing. And that hasn't happened. And also, in the interim, the sites or the space then has become our homes. And so there's the difference between the criminalizing of the occupations by those pushing the narrative that we are hijacking land, we are hijacking buildings. Because when people hijack buildings, they hijack buildings to make a profit, or they hijack buildings to make money or to charge rent. And that's not the case in these building occupations. People are not renting out the space. People are here to turn the space into a home.
There's a difference between turning a space into a home and then using that space to rent out to make a profit. A few more comments that came through. This person says the person that never made any effort, like looking on the road, get a house for free and sit in the sun the whole day. Another comment coming through saying, Assalamu alaikum, aren't we as legal claimants more entitled to occupy land? Simonstown, District 6 and Constantia. And then another one saying, is it okay for people to put up plastic tents in pavements on any empty space they see at busy intersections? They urinate and defecate in public view. When council moves them, they don't want shelter. They don't want to get an ID document or find their families. Who pays the rates when they are hijacking buildings? And with the same land, who pays for the space they occupy? So the listeners have a lot to say, and they are thinking about a lot, and I'm not sure if you can answer that. But I, on the one hand, feel that it seems it's very difficult for me to sort of accept what is being said this evening, because it's almost encouraging people. Yes, people take the power in your own hands. But what does that mean when you take the power in your own hands? What should you be doing? And when we speak about this waiting list that I feel that most organizations know does not exist, like our people aren't going to get homes, then there must be more to this conversation than just saying that because of history and this is where we are and this is what we're doing. Because now ordinary South Africans, taxpayers, who are asking, well, okay, you saying you can occupy the space because you want to create a home. What do we do? You can go ahead.
So says Nikelwa, would you answer that?
Nikelwa seems to have dropped the line. We've been trying to get her back on. It's not working out.
All right. So Farida, I think my answer here is that people housing is not just a human right, Farida. But at this point, because we're in a very deep housing crisis, and a housing crisis that is causing resentment of the undeserved poor and the deserved poor, it's causing that divide between the poor. And
explain the two divide, please. Undeserved poor and the deserved poor. What does that mean?
So the undeserved poor would obviously be the people who are living in informality and those who are not recognized. And the deserved poor would then be others who have like the undeserved poor, applied for housing, of course, are able to afford it. But then again, the system still fails the undeserved poor and the poor at the same time.
I'm still struggling, Karen. I won't lie. I'm really struggling to conceptualize everything that we're speaking today, because we are sort of trying to believe that, Reclaim Your City, the Indibano, Yabahlali, organizations like this encourage a positive way of getting out of homelessness. I'm still stuck on occupation. I'm still stuck on some of the questions I think that you might be finding difficult to, or the comments finding difficult to respond to. But there's really a lot of emphasis on going back to 29 years ago. And I understand that it played a big part. I get that. But when we have all these organizations trying to deal with this current crisis, are you then just saying that, okay, if we have to wait for so long, then where the space is, we're going to go there and create a home, and that's okay? So then what happens when the police rocks up? Are we then rendered homeless again?
So, Farida, I'd like to say what we really need to do, or what government needs to do, is to commit to provide dignified housing, which is affordable, and with security of tenure. And that means that people who live on site, or people who are protected from eviction or further displacement, or future displacement. It also means that you live with agency, you live with independence, that you have a right to access basic services, and that you live without fear of being forced to move, or without fear of being rendered homeless. And when it comes to the laws, unfortunately, Farida, the laws are not respected by private landlords nor by the state. Hence, we often see how illegal eviction of poor and homeless people are conducted.
Law is, when it comes to laws, that's an interesting concept, because occupation is also part of that law. Now, just to piggyback on something you said earlier on, you said people have freedom of movement, and people in the Western Cape cannot say no to people from KZN or from Joburg and so on. So when you say freedom of movement, they're allowed to do that, but that freedom of movement should allow them the opportunity to be able to live in a place that they can afford. And we are speaking about the poor or the working class, and we are trying to get them closer to spaces where they can, closer to spaces where they have the opportunities that are available to them. So when you speak about freedom of movement, how do you tie in affordability? Because we are looking at most affordable places are in townships and on the Cape Flats. So what would that look like in the future? Or what should it look like?
So when we're speaking about, so when we know that the government has lots of unutilized land, they also have unutilized buildings. And as before, we've said that people need to live close to economic and opportunities and social amenities. And so government actually lacks the will to build housing or develop housing which is well located and affordable for the majority of poor people. And so we are asking government, all spheres of government, to recognize this struggle as a human issue, so that people, so that it underpins human dignity, the same human dignity that is underpinned in our Constitution. And we need to commit as a city or nationally, we need to commit to provide housing even for the poorest of poor, with security of tenure.
Karen,
And as
I'm sorry to butt in. I just need to read this comment, and because we have a minute to conclude the show, it says, Salam, please could you tell the lady it's not about the people that's coming from Eastern Cape. It's not about the people that's coming from Eastern Cape that shouldn't live here. They come here and they protest and they vandalize the infrastructure. They get houses. We Cape Townians don't do that. We accept everything. What about the people that's been living here the rest of all their lives in the backyards and that's living with family, with a lot of people in a house that's on the waiting list for years and years, that's not getting a house to be fair and just so that you can say whatever you want to say, but you're not treating people fairly. Karen, we have to conclude the show. I just think about that comment, and should we speak next week? I'd like you to comment on that and just think about all the other comments that came through. But thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Have yourself a wonderful evening.
Most certainly, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
You're welcome. That was Karen Hendricks from Reclaim the City, and earlier on we had Nikelwa, leader of the Indibano Yabahlali organization, speaking to us about we were uncovering the people's land and what women can do about land and housing. And yes, we sort of went around it was a hard one to have, but we have to conclude this show. I'm Farida Rabia and Soki and Zinzi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.